The U.S. is encircling Taiwan. It's beefing up its presence there to prevent China from invading and sparking World War III. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. When it comes to how the United States would react if China were to invade Taiwan, they've been very cryptic. And I'm not just saying that because the guy in charge of that decision looks like the Crypt Keeper. The Biden administration especially has brought the U.S. policy of strategic ambiguity to new levels of ambiguity. In August 2021, Biden said, "We made a sacred commitment to Article 5 that if in fact anyone were to invade or take action against our NATO allies, we would respond. Same with Japan, same with South Korea, same with Taiwan." Shortly after that, though, the White House said Biden had misspoken. Because forget something like, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." President Biden's most notable quote is someone else yelling what he meant to say was. But just 2 months later, he said the same thing again.
China just tested a hypersonic missile. What will you do to keep up with them militarily, and can you vow to protect Taiwan?
Yes and yes.
So are you saying that the United States would come to Taiwan's defense if China attacked?
Yes, we have a commitment to do that.
And again, the White House corrected him. Man, I hope the White House is wearing a Fitbit to keep track of all the steps they're getting in while walking back everything he says. But apparently Biden still hadn't gotten the message because 7 months later, he said it again.
Are you willing to get involved militarily to defend Taiwan if it comes to that?
Yes.
You are.
That's the commitment we made.
And yes, you guessed it, the White House walked it back right after. Oh, look, they made their step goal, 25 months in a row. I guess President Biden needed a fourth reminder, though, because he said it again 4 months later.
But would U.S. forces defend the island?
Yes, if in fact there was an unprecedented attack.
After our interview, a White House official told us U.S. policy has not changed. Officially, the U.S. will not say whether American forces would defend Taiwan.
Please, stop asking him about Taiwan. My legs are too tired to walk back anymore. Yes, there's a reason U.S. policy on Taiwan is called strategic ambiguity. It's so ambiguous, even the White House doesn't agree on what it is. Like most countries, the U.S. doesn't have official diplomatic relations with Taiwan, and is cagey about whether Taiwan is even a country. So they think it simultaneously is and isn't at the same time. Who do they think the president of Taiwan is, Schrodinger? I'm not ambiguous. Taiwan is a country. But the U.S. does have a law called the Taiwan Relations Act, which says the U.S. is committed to the preservation of human rights there, and that the U.S. will not only arm Taiwan for its self-defense, but also resist any resort to force or other forms of coercion that would jeopardize the security or social or economic system of the people of Taiwan. So the U.S. is willing to fight for Taiwan, but not call them a country. Makes sense. Wouldn't want to piss off China as you're about to go to war with them. That'd be like refusing to curse at someone while fist fighting them. Well, it seems that last part about resisting force has kicked in. The U.S. is encircling Taiwan with its military, which is right in Beijing's backyard. By doing that, they're preparing for a possible war over Taiwan. That has made the Chinese Communist Party really, really mad. I'll tell you more after the break. Welcome back. So the U.S. has kind of said it will defend Taiwan if China invades. But, like your jacked friend who got bullied growing up and now tries to look super intimidating, the U.S. is hoping its muscles will deter China from attacking in the first place. The U.S. has been working on making a military circle around Taiwan, and recently that circle got a little beefier. The U.S. signed an agreement with the Philippines to expand its military presence there. The U.S. military already uses 5 bases in the Philippines, but with this agreement it now has access to 4 more. It's not clear yet where they're going to be, but last November, the Philippines said the U.S. was looking at several locations in the north of the country, If it is those locations, it would position U.S. forces a lot closer to Taiwan. It would also make it more risky for Chinese forces to travel through the Bashi Channel, which is one of the ways China might try to surround Taiwan. Essentially, this can all be summed up with this meme. Yep, there isn't a military strategy in history that can't be explained with a meme. The U.S. also has troops on the other side of Taiwan, the Japanese island of Okinawa. That, together with its troops in Guam, mainland Japan, and South Korea, means the U.S. has military bases in strategic locations near Taiwan. The U.S. likes Taiwan so much they're trying to put a ring on it, a military ring. And the U.S. is beefing up its military presence in all of those locations, not just the Philippines. Last month, the U.S. announced it would put new anti-ship missiles on Okinawa. Also last month, the U.S. announced a new base in Guam. It's on the western side of the island, closest to Taiwan, and is aimed at deterring an invasion by China. It will eventually house 5,000 Marines charged in the short term with deterring and detecting threats in the region. And longer term, the Guam base is also slated to be a hub for Marines on Guam and across the northern Mariana Islands to train for protecting Pacific Islands, including vital sea lanes in the event of an invasion. Considering all this effort the U.S. is putting into protecting Taiwan, maybe Joe Biden's most notable quote will wind up being, "See, I told you so." Moving north, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin visited South Korea last month. He said the U.S. would step up drills with the South Korean military and send more fighter jets and bombers. Now, South Korea is worried about China's aggressiveness in the region, but it's a little more worried right now about Kim Jong-un's nukes, which he doesn't seem to be getting tired of playing with. North Korea launched a record number of ballistic missiles last year, and Kim Jong-un recently called for an exponential increase in nuclear warheads. 2023 is off to a great start so far, am I right? There is some good news in the South Pacific, though. Fiji's new government scrapped a policing deal it had with China. Starting in 2011, police from Fiji would train in China, and police from China would patrol in Fiji. The new prime minister said he pulled out of the deal because Fiji and China have different systems, and Fiji wants to stick with other countries with democracy and similar justice systems. As if their water couldn't get any more delicious, it's now made with CCP tears. That's refreshing. Northwest of Fiji, in the Solomon Islands, the U.S. is trying to make a comeback by reopening its embassy in the country's capital, Honiara. The U.S. closed its previous embassy there in 1993, and it's a good example of what happens when the cat goes away. Solomon Islands became ground zero for Chinese influence in the Pacific Islands. Foreign policy in that region is like playing a game of Twister and Whack-A-Mole at the same time. Not only did the Solomon Islands have a policing agreement with China, but the Prime Minister signed a secret security deal with China last April. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of Chinese influence in the country. Just this month, one of the strongest anti-CCP voices in the government was removed from office. He was accused of misappropriating funds, but his supporters say this was a trumped-up charge meant to silence him. We interviewed him last year on our show. Check it out. I'll put a link in the description below. Now, I can't say for certain if he was misappropriating funds, but if he were, I'd imagine he'd dress less like this and more like this. So, not all good news in the South Pacific, but hey, this is 2023. We might be lucky if we get through the year without World War III. You know the year's off to a great start when the only thing on your vision board is no apocalypse, please. Speaking of the Pacific, the U.S. is renegotiating military deals with the Marshall Islands, Palau, and the Federated States of Micronesia. Called the Compacts of Free Association, they effectively give the U.S. military control over a huge swath of the Western Pacific that, when combined with the U.S. Pacific territories of Guam and the Northern Marianas, is on par with the size of the continental U.S. The U.S. had agreements with them already, but they were set to expire in the next year or two, and so had to be renewed. The terms of the deal seem to have been mostly agreed on, it's just how much the U.S. will pay that's up in the air. And, I hate to call this good news, but New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has resigned. The reason I put that in the good news category is because she was pretty friendly with Beijing. She wasn't the one who signed the country's Belt and Road Agreement with China, but her government definitely cheered it on. And she did nothing to stop it from auto-renewing last March. That's right, the Belt and Road is so sinister, it auto-renews. Just like that subscription to that dating app for juggalos you signed up for as a joke and forgot about years ago but keep getting billed for every month. And no, that's not a joke. There's actually a dating site for juggalos. They need love too, you know. Ardern was all about having an independent foreign policy from the US and Australia, which is fine except that it meant being closer to Beijing. Fortunately, New Zealand's neighbor down under has been pretty clear on China over the past few years. The US has a couple thousand troops stationed in Australia, and last year announced plans to send more. Australia went from a prison colony to a freedom colony. Name a more iconic glow-up from a country. But the biggest win for the US in the region is by far the Philippines. Under former President Rodrigo Duterte, the US visiting forces agreement with the Philippines was almost canceled. It should come as no surprise that while he was threatening to kick US troops out, he was cozying up to China. Now the new president, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., is still all about trade with China, but has moved closer to the US in terms of security. Because the US makes people feel safe in their beefy arms. This is critical because the Philippines is part of what's called the First Island Chain. Taiwan, Japan, and the Philippines are what's preventing China from easily moving east and projecting power into the Pacific Ocean. That's one of the reasons China wants Taiwan so badly, and why it's been trying so hard to tear the Philippines away from the US. Fortunately, governments do change, and their alliances do too. And at least for now, that's stopping China from outright invading other countries in the region. But whether the United States' presence will actually deter China from invading Taiwan remains to be seen. And who knows how the US would react to an invasion. Joe Biden says the US would help, but that might wind up getting walked back for the 7 billionth time. And China Uncensored is supported mainly by viewers like you, either on the crowdfunding website Patreon or our exclusive social media site on Locals, which is why I thank those viewers by answering their questions on the show. And today's question comes from Madry Bread on Patreon, who asks, I've always heard that China claims to own all panda bears in the world, regardless of what country they're actually from. Is that actually true? Because, to be honest, it doesn't sound that far-fetched to claim for them. Yes, that sounds crazy, but it's actually true. China does claim that all panda bears in the world belong to them. Who wants one of these stupid lazy bears anyway? Zoos do, because they bring in the big bucks from crowds. But since pandas are only native to China, the Chinese regime actually rents out these pandas to zoos across the world for $1 million or more a year each. And zoos will sign 10-year contracts. That's a lot of money for one panda. Plus, if you rent a pair of pandas and one of them ends up giving birth to a little panda cub, that cub costs the zoo an extra $400,000. And that cub belongs to China, no matter where in the world it was born. When it turns 3, it gets shipped back to China. Plus, if the Chinese Communist Party gets mad at a country for a political reason, like, say, a trade war, they can recall their pandas by not renewing panda agreements. If this all sounds messed up, it is. Luckily, China doesn't own the rights to the word panda. Don't know if I'd enjoy orange chicken as much at a place called Koala Express. They all have chlamydia, you know. Thanks for your question, Madry Bread. Thanks for supporting the show on Patreon. You too can support us for as little as $1 per episode over at patreon.com/China Uncensored. We rely on your support to keep making great episodes. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.